Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. My name is Wladimir Palant. I came here from Germany. Nice to be somewhere warm. It's really freezing in Germany right now. Nice photo. I started contributing to Mozilla in 2003. That's a long time ago, almost 15 years already. That's where I learned a lot about open source, how it really works, not in theory where you know that, yeah, source code is published, but what does it really mean? How you make sure that people contribute to your code base, that how you make decisions and everything else in an open source project. That influenced me a lot, and particularly when I created Adblock Plus, which I used to be the lead developer of, and also when we created a company to be behind Adblock Plus called IO. So I was the CTO of IO originally. Made sense at that time. I no longer am, which I consider myself to be lucky. So as you notice, there will be a lot about the past in that talk, but I also want to mention briefly what I'm doing right now. So 10 years ago, about that time, I got into web application security, and I learned a lot about security since then, which also made me do things like not share my private details publicly as much as it goes, which you can see from my photos. Yeah, I try not to have any photos online. And that's what I've been doing a lot since then. And right now, I call myself proudly an independent security researcher. That's not an official title, because it's something you call yourself, just because you feel like you are one. And I also have new projects, especially a password manager called Pain-Free Passwords. I'll mention that briefly as well later in the talk. So I prepared a presentation answering a bunch of questions that you didn't ask, but that's not really why I'm here. I want to answer the questions that you do ask. So if you want to know anything, please remember there will be time for questions at the end of the talk. And let me start with a few milestones first, just to show you the timeline. The Adblock Plus project started 12 years ago. That is quite a while. So in January 2006, I released the very first version of Adblock Plus. Back then it was only for Firefox and SeaMonkey, so it was a Mozilla-only project. That's how it all started. And already late in the same year, it was the most popular Firefox extension. If you count that as 10 months. So that product picked up like a rocket. A year later, we hit the mainstream newspapers, above all the New York Times. There was lots of news coverage after that. And why that happened? Because some guy got really angry about Adblock Plus. He said, ad blocking is stealing, and that's why I will block Firefox. All Firefox users. Crazy guy. Great PR for us. Yeah. Eventually, in 2011, we created a company to run the project. That was a very important step. It changed everything for us, for the project, and I think it's the reason why the product is still alive. In 2015, we got to the point where somebody else could take over the CTO role. So that's the point where I went back to being a regular developer, so I could do stuff like coding again. What we achieved in this project. there were quite a few achievements here. First of all, of course, the users, but we don't know how many users there are. On the website, it says 100 million devices. Yeah. Anyway, lots of users. Nobody knows exactly how many. The company, IO, now has more than 100 employees, people who work from all over the world. So it's not a small startup anymore. It's remarkable. I wouldn't have imagined that. We made quite a few enemies. That's also a measure of success, I guess. If you do something important, you will always have enemies. And right now they are fighting us in court in Germany. I think it is something like 6 lawsuits in parallel. And so far, IO won all of them. There will be a decision by the highest court in Germany this year. So stay put. I really expect us to win there again. So quite a few people tried to shut down IO altogether, but so far completely unsuccessful. And the lobby organizations of the advertisers, the very hardcore organization, IAB, finally accepted that, well, maybe advertisers did something wrong. Maybe making the advertising that annoying was a wrong thing to do, and maybe the ad blockers are a response to that. So they published some guidelines on how to make advertising less annoying, which is exactly what we have been fighting for all along. That is quite remarkable. The IO now doesn't do just Adblock Plus. So there is Adblock Plus for a multitude of platforms. There's Firefox, there's Chrome, there's Microsoft Edge, but there's also Adblock Browser, for example, now, which is the way to bring ad blocking to the mobile platforms, because mobile browsers don't support extensions. And recently there's also Flutter, which is another way to give money to websites, to publishers, that doesn't rely on advertising. And that is something that is still the case after how many years? 70 years of IO. It's a company, but it is still dedicated strongly to open source, to their users, to the privacy of their users. Yeah, and I think it is something. May I ask you, who of you uses an ad blocker? Wow. Yeah, that's almost everybody. Is there anybody who knows about ad blockers but decided not to install one? Okay, one person. I'm looking forward to your questions. Good. Yeah, I forgot one important achievement. That human-sized hamster wheel in the IO office. I have never seen anybody work in that, but maybe that's just because I haven't been to the office that often. But yeah, not many companies have that in their office. Okay. Now, let's handle the most important question first. At least I guess it's the most important question because that is what people always ask in an interview. How did you come up with that idea? I guess they think that it went this way, that one morning I woke up and thought, hey, I should be building an ad blocker because it will be immensely popular, it is a great thing to do. Sorry, that's not how it worked. I didn't even come up with that idea because in reality, there have been ways to block ads long before Adblock Plus. For example, the host file can just redirect the request to a black hole. It is not very convenient, but it works. I used it myself long before I started using Adblock. Or for example, filtering proxies. They have been available since at least 2001. I know one product, Proxies, it has been published back then. And there was even, Adblock. Adblock 1.0 browser extension was released in 2002, 4 years before I decided to create my own. And that's actually what I have been using myself, starting with 2003. That is Adblock. A bit old-fashioned probably these days, but that's what it looked like. You could add some filters, and then it would block ads. Or hide them, actually, for most part. Because originally it was not actually, it was called Adblock, but it couldn't block any web request. It would merely hide ads. I contributed to Adblock. I was actually the one who found a way to block network requests, so that Adblock would actually save network traffic, would prevent the website from contacting the ad server in the first place, not just hiding ads. And for a while that was it. I contributed to Adblock, but then I just realized it wasn't going anywhere. We had a huge disagreement with the Adblock author, maintainer at that time, and I thought, okay, I can do it myself. I'll do my own, call it Adblock Plus, and 2006, that's when I released it. So how did it happen that Adblock Plus succeeded, and how did it succeed so quickly, most importantly? Actually, not so obvious, but one important factor is, of course, you need to improve. The product is never done. You have to improve. You have to collect feedback from the user base. You have to understand what are you doing good, what are you doing badly, and then you have to go to improving again. Of course, that's obvious, but very often products just stop developing, and that's when users start to migrate to something new. Adblock Plus, luckily, never did stop. And there was some very important innovation, namely automatic configuration. With the early adopters, you can do things like tell them, hey, add filters. You can write filters yourself. That works with the early adopters. But if you want to reach the mainstream users, the way you do that is to give them something that just works. You install Adblock Plus, and it works out of the box. Nothing to be done. Okay, almost. This is what you saw when you installed Adblock Plus in the first 5 years of its existence. You would see a filter list selection. It would tell you, hey, great that you installed Adblock Plus, but it's not quite ready yet. You have to make the final decision. Which filter list? We already choose one which should be good enough, but you have to confirm it. One click. And you don't realize how many people failed to do that one click. That was a really bad idea. It took me 5 years to admit that giving the users a final decision was a bad choice, because too many users fail to do that final decision, and then they are confused why Adblock Plus is not working. Now the approach is configure everything automatically, tell the user that it has been configured, and make it easy to change the default configuration. That's how it works now. That's a better way. And I totally failed to realize that for a while. So maybe it was not as innovative as it should have been. But there were definitely other factors as well that contributed to the success. and maybe those were more important. Most importantly, Mozilla has been pushing Adblock Plus very hard. Mozilla realized early on that Adblock Plus is a game changer, that it was the way to tell users why their platform is so great. Because Adblock Plus existed only for Firefox. And Mozilla promoted Adblock Plus. Great for us. The other factor was, of course, that there was really no competition at that time. Adblock, that I mentioned before, essentially went out of business the moment we arrived. The last release of Adblock was in January 2006, which is the same time when Adblock Plus was released. The website is still online. So the product is only half dead. They just don't release code. Okay. And Adblock Plus was open source from the beginning, because that's what Mozilla does. That's what we did as well with Adblock Plus. It was open source from the very start. Did that work out? That's a big question. That's a question. And I would say yes. Being open source was really worth it for us, but not for the obvious reasons. Because the most important reason, in my opinion, it was transparency. Transparency is how you establish trust. You do work in the open. Everybody can see what you do, and that's how people trust in your product. That's how you. I think that's the most useful factor of being open source. But of course, we also had our community, and people contributed. People did a lot. People did the filter lists. The filters for Adblock Plus, to this day, are mostly contributed by the community. Most translations are being done by the community. User support, even iOS today doesn't have the resources to support 100 million users. And this is work done by the community. Obviously, testing, bug reports, word of mouth, telling other people about Adblock Plus, installing Adblock Plus on their computers. That is all work that has been done by the community. There's one thing missing here. What about the source code? Yeah, and source code contributions were not a lot, pretty much not existent. Yeah. Yeah, why is that? The thing I realized in those years is as the product grows, you don't gain more contributors. In fact, your best chances to gain source code contributions are when the product is small and you have lots of early adopters, because those are the people who have the knowledge to contribute. Contributed source code is complicated. It requires some knowledge, particularly in the area where I started with, Firefox extensions used to be very complicated. There have been very tough issues, and contributing required quite significant knowledge. So as we have grown, we added mainstream users, and those users simply didn't have that knowledge for most part. Of course, there's also the factor that people contribute code because they scratch their own itch. And you can take it as a compliment that you have no contributions because you do a good job. Nobody needs to scratch anything because they are already happy with the product. And of course, yeah, people are busy. People don't have time to learn everything about your project, so you have to make it easy for them to contribute. So you have to think about things like, is the information about contributing easy to find? Is the code base easy to navigate? How easy is the process of contributing properly explained on the website or somewhere else? Can you give feedback quickly? Yes, people send you code, they expect feedback. If you reply in a week, they might be gone already. And in the end, that part of allowing contributions to work, requires lots of time. Probably more time that you are going to gain from the contributions that you are going to save there. For me, it just wasn't worth it. I was alone. I was the only developer in the project, and investing so much effort into helping other people contribute would never pay off. That's quite an issue here. So let's go to the next question, which would be, why did I keep going? What did I get out of it? And clearly, I did get lots of experience from that project. I mean, when I started, I knew very little about things like user experience. How do you design a product in a way that people find usable? Originally, I designed it in suboptimal ways that advanced users would like, but mainstream users, not so much. And from the feedback, from my adjustments to the code base, I learned a lot about what users expect from a product, how it can work optimally, how it should work. That is one area, for example, where I think I learned I learned really lots of things. Obviously, you get satisfaction from it. You have a product that is used by millions of people. You have done something great. So satisfaction is definitely going to happen. Recognition is also important. Everybody can go there and look at your product. And they say, oh, that guy wrote it. He must be really good. In fact, I got every single job because people knew my work on Adblock Plus. So, really good. And yes, gratitude would be the next point. And sometimes the users come and say, hey, I'm so grateful. You have created Adblock Plus that saved my life. And sometimes this happens. So people come and say, that update was horrible. You did everything wrong. So sad to be you. So if you expect gratitude, there will be some, but those experiences can be really demotivating. Which is why, if you ask me, can it work in the long term that you are the only developer on a popular open source project? I say, yeah, unlikely. I don't know, maybe some people manage to do it. I cannot. I didn't manage to do it. I realized that my popular hobby project was being too much work. I was having too little time for it. I mean, I started it when I was a PhD student. My PhD didn't go well. I already realized that it wouldn't go anywhere. So I had lots of time to spend on my hobby. But that didn't keep up. I mean, I got family, I got a real job that would take me 8 hours a day. And yeah, how can I keep still work on something else? And a popular project is really demanding as your time goes. And as I already mentioned, my motivation was on a decline. So how did I solve that? Yeah, we got all corporate. We founded a company. Yeah, that's not how IO Office really looks like. IO is not that corporate. But we created a company. I found an investor, I found a partner who would take care of the business, and we created a company, so the product was no longer me alone. How did that change things? Of course, one part of it is it was now a job. My motivation didn't matter anymore. I had to work. That can be positive because motivation is a factor that can come and go. But it can also be negative because sometimes I have a great idea of what I can do and I work on it, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm really unproductive, but it is my job, I have to work, so I'm essentially wasting my time. But as a company, there are goals. It's no longer anything is fine, but as a company, you need to grow the user base. You need to think about that. You need to do other things. So the direction of the product definitely changed to some degree, but it's also a chance. You can learn new things. You can, for example, hire people. It's also an interesting experience when you do a job interview with somebody and you are on the hiring side. So you are interviewing a candidate. On the other hand, you can also delegate tasks that you don't want to do. For example, I think the moment when we created I/O was the moment when I started watching the forum. Because it was so much noise on the forum, so many people with almost the same problems, I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. And I thought, somebody else can do it. Well, yeah, they didn't do a great job with that, but yeah, not my fault anymore. Of course, the most important change is we have more people, and if you have more people, what do? Meetings. So let me say it like that. If you add people, the productivity decreases. That might be a bit controversial, but look at it this way. If you are a single developer in a project, you have really no overhead. It's all you, no other people here, so you can spend all the time developing. And you can also take shortcuts. For example, unit tests, very popular shortcut. Who cares about unit tests? Who cares about documentation? You know it all. So single developer is in a perfect position to be really quick, to do things really quickly. But if you have a team, that all changes. All of a sudden you have to coordinate tasks because you have more people on the team. You have to do code reviews. I mean, requesting code review is not as bad, but you have to actually review other people's code, and that takes lots of time. You have to do documentation, because if you don't document things, somebody else will not understand your code, and then later on they will create bugs. You have policy discussions. Come on. Yeah, it's a project, and now everybody wants to have a say in which direction it should be going. Hiring is an opportunity to learn new things, but it also creates overhead. You have to interview, you have to look for candidates, you have to interview them, and later on you have to mentor them, because when they start in the company, they just don't know what it is about. They don't know how things go. You have to teach them everything, and that is also taking lots of time. And one thing that I didn't expect was you have more resources, so the scope of the project is growing. Because now you can finally take on more tasks. In fact, in my experience, the scope was always growing faster than we were hiring people. We originally had only the Firefox extension, but then it was important to have the Chrome extension as well, the Safari extension, and Edge, and the scope was always growing. Now I/O is creating a whole new browser. Wow. So it's something that I didn't expect. As the team grows, your subjective opinion is that things slow down instead of getting faster. Of course, that's not right. That's not true. You get more things done. but in the product that you care about, in that one particular area, it's getting to slow down. For example, Adblock Plus for Firefox, the extension that I originally created, has seen very little development in the first few years of I/O. It simply wasn't a priority. We had to do other things. So, well, of course, slowing down progress is not the only issue that you have to face. I want to mention one other important issue that you have to face as a company or as any larger project, actually: ethics. As a small project, you really don't need to care about ethics. Whatever you do, it's all fine, because whatever you do, it only affects a small number of people. As you get larger, you really cannot avoid stepping on other people's toes. You will always offend somebody. And there will always be hard questions to answer. For example, in our case, the Adblockers was, for example, are users really in control? Originally, Adblock Plus insisted on the user making the final click. Now it no longer does. So it is all automatic. Is the user still in control? Or are we as the developers in control? That's not how it should be. So do we inform the users about what they can do with the product to make it do what they want? Do we sufficiently inform them? Yeah, who knows? And then there's, of course, the publishers who claim that ad blockers steal from them, because the publishers don't get any money for blocked ads. To the point that the free web, as we know it, all the content is free. You merely have to watch the ads, might get completely destroyed. Will it be? I think the answer to those two questions is no. Ad blocking is not stealing, and the free web will not be destroyed. But there is definitely a factor here that some websites, particularly websites with a technical audience, particularly smaller websites, can go out of business because of ad blockers. So that is something that to be considered. And with I/O, we try to find a middle ground between the users and the publishers. Some of you probably heard about the Acceptable Ads program, where Adblock Plus tries to find the ads that are not annoying, that will be shown by default. The user can always disable them, but the default is to show some advertising so that the publisher still gets some money. But of course, the user-based reaction was, come on, you sold out. You broke it. That was a great product until you started to show ads. That's what we heard, and we still hear a lot. So who decides what ads should be blocked, what ads shouldn't be blocked? That is also an important ethical question, and we didn't want to be the gatekeepers here. We didn't want to be the ones who decide, to make those decisions, because we are not an independent party. That was to some degree solved by transferring the control of the acceptable ads criteria to an independent board. So there is an acceptable ads board that will decide on changes to the criteria by which some ads will be allowed, some ads will not be allowed. But of course, pop-up ads, for example, or animated ads will never be allowed, because those are just too annoying to be there by default. So there is this controversial question. If you are a company, is it even possible to act ethically? If the decision is it money or is it users? Some people say a company will always choose money. Obviously, I disagree. And we tried to build up an ethical company there. But how is that possible? So originally, I was looking over to Mozilla. That's what I usually do. And Mozilla has an interesting organizational structure. Mozilla is separated into Mozilla Foundation and Mozilla Corporation. The foundation is a non-profit organization. So they are not even allowed to make money. And the foundation owns the corporation. And I thought this kind of setup might be useful to keep the product pure, to keep it from doing ethically wrong things. I no longer think that way. I realized that at Mozilla, the foundation, this structure has too little impact on the real world policies. So, and one factor to that is that the corporation has way more employees than the foundation. So it just doesn't work. That foundation dictates the policies for the corporation. So I realized that it is all about people. It is all about the company culture. That's how a company can be ethical, because it's in the culture of the company. Because you have people who will make the right policies, who will defend the right policies, and even against the management. But it is, of course, important to remember the values in a company propagate from top to down. So it doesn't work that the management isn't on board with those ethical principles, and the lower levels have to explain them to the management. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have it also. You need to have the management accept it that you are an ethical company. So that's how it works. And if somebody says you are doing the wrong thing, then they might be right. Then you don't fight them, but rather listen. Open discussion culture. That's how it works. Everybody can contribute to the decision-making process. That's the only way it can work. And if you hire the right people. Because if the people that you have in the company are those who just don't care, whatever you tell them, it's all okay, then it will not work. So how did we try to do it at I/O? Obviously, so first is you have to set the right goals. The goal of the company is helping people, helping users, helping publishers to some degree, as much as possible, making sure the web as a whole is sustainable, the web as a whole is usable for everybody. And of course, you have to make an impact. If you are too small, you will not achieve any goals. So commercial success is not a goal. Commercial success is important, of course. You need money for the product to be sustainable. But money is not what you are after. That's, and another important factor is transparency. Of course, it is an open source project. The development is all transparent. Everybody can look at the development. What about the other areas? In the early stages of the company, of I/O, some people thought it would be a great idea to create a fake persona. Some fake person, they would write reviews about Adblock Plus, great reviews, and this way it would attract more users. Of course, they wouldn't disclose the relationship to I/O. Well, that's a bit of a shady thing to do. And of course, it blew up into our faces. Because we are a very exposed product. There are quite a few people watching us, and somebody noticed. somebody published, somebody wrote about it, and people weren't happy. You, as an open source product, you shouldn't be doing shady things. As a transparent product, you shouldn't be doing shady things. You should, if you write something about your product, you should always make sure that people know that you are affiliated with that product. So that's, you always have to make sure the community knows what you're doing, because the community is, in the end, your judge. Because if you're making a hard decision, you can always ask yourself, okay, so the community will might notice that you're doing this. Will they agree? Will you be able to explain to them why you are doing this? Will you be able to defend the decision? And if the answer is no, then maybe it's not the right decision to do. That's what transparency is about for me. That you can defend your position, that you can explain why is it, you can ethically explain why you are doing this and not that. But that's one part of the picture. That's what you do to the outside. The other important thing is what you do inside the company. You want to have the right people in the company. I already mentioned you have to hire the right people who care about things. And that doesn't happen automatically. One way to do it is to make sure your employees have as much freedom as possible. You have flexible working times, you have flexible work locations. I already mentioned people are working from all over the world. We are a company that tries to enable remote working as much as possible. But if people prefer to work in the office, they are free to do that as well. And everybody can decide what tasks are most important to work on. Even if it is not part of your job description. If it is important, you can work on it. That's how you attract people who who care about the job and who will tell you if you're doing something wrong. Also, the way we try to structure I/O is meritocracy, which means it doesn't matter where in the hierarchy you are. It matters what can you say. So there's very little formal hierarchy in the company. Instead, everybody can take responsibility. Everybody can take responsibility for some part of the product. They can be a model owner. That's how we call it. And they will, and then they are responsible for doing the right thing. They will also be responsible for defending the right thing towards other people, of course. Because there will always be somebody who questions it. For example, as any company, we need to know how successful we are. We need to look at data and say, hey, this worked, this didn't work. But how much data can we collect? And as far as user privacy goes, Adblock Plus takes a very different stance from most of the competition. Adblock Plus tries to collect as little data as possible because we don't want users to be trusted with users' data. We collect only the data that Adblock Plus really needs to work. Everything else is unnecessary. Sure, we could use the data. We could use it to generate some nice statistics, to learn more about our product. But we try not to do that because it's not something we should do. It's not something that we can ethically defend. There will be an opt-in data collection feature in the product at some point where we ask the users, hey, do you want to contribute some of your data so that we can improve the product? That's how it can do. That's how it can work. But automatically collecting data from all the users, that's something that we explicitly didn't want to do, and that It is being discussed within the team all the time, but that's the policy that still stands. Okay, mission accomplished. IO is there, it is working well, to the point where I personally can leave. In fact, this year I'm no longer technically employed by IO, so I took the entire year off for sabbatical, where I can work on my hobbies, on other things that are of interest for me. There has been a presentation right now about how you should do new things. That's what I'm doing right now. I mean, it's Adblock Plus is a great project. It is a nice success, but I want to do something new. I still want to try out new things, learn new things, and maybe there will be another great product coming for me. Most importantly, of course, I can leave now because there are other people who can take care of the project, which is a very important milestone for me. In 2011, I was the only developer. Now there are many developers, and there's a guy who is CTO that I fully trust to do the right thing. So the product is no longer dependent on me. That took a while, and yeah, 12 years. 12 years to get there. So I think it is time. It was about time for me to do something else. So what am I doing right now? I'm doing security research, particularly password managers. I found out that password managers are not as great as they should be. I mean, there are security products in theory, but most of them are not as secure. But they're necessary. Because you have lots of accounts, you just cannot remember so many passwords. But you should still have a unique password for each account, because if you reuse passwords, if you have, for example, one password for all accounts, passwords leak all the time. There will be one website hacked, and your password is known to your password is known then, and people will try to hack into your other accounts. Very bad things happen. And I think two-factor authentication is great, but in the end, no way around password managers. Yet, they are not secure. Most of the time, that's what I found out. They have very often issues with their browser integration, because the browser integration has security issues that allow websites to extract data. They often use cryptography that is just broken, that is not the right approach. But, especially, a password manager usually has a master password, and most of them don't protect that master password well. And finally, and that was an absolute no-go for me, almost every password manager, or almost every popular password manager out there requires you to trust a web server. They have a web server that stores all your data, and you're supposed to trust it. Why? Yeah, I don't understand that. You definitely shouldn't be trusting any servers, which is why I decided, which I thought a local-only password manager is definitely better, where all your data is stored locally on your machine, but the ones that exist are not very usable, in my opinion. So I decided I can do better. I can create a password manager that works better. One that is not relying on a server, and still is easy to use, is integrated into the browser in a secure way that does not open it up to issues to websites, that does not have issues that will allow extracting data. One that has good cryptography, perfect optimal protection of your data, as much as it works, as it's possible today, and that can, most importantly, recover from a data loss. because I don't know about you, my absolute horror scenario is when I use a password manager and my hard drive crashes, that all the data is lost. That is pretty bad, because then I would lose access to most of my accounts. Not really a good thing thing for me. So one approach that you can do with the password manager that I built was just print out some metadata. And you know what? It is secure. As long as nobody knows your master password, that piece of paper is absolutely useless. But for you, it allows you to recover all the data. Of course, you should still do backups online, which is why I recently developed a sync feature that allows to upload data to some storage server automatically and encrypted. No, nothing being shared there with a server. So it's all encrypted, but you have an automatic backup. You have a way to sync up multiple devices if you have more than one. Password sharing is still something to be done, but I already have a concept how it can work, despite not being a password manager that stores data in the cloud. That's just a rough overview. That's an old project of mine, actually. I started it almost 2 years ago, but now I finally had time to invest more time into it. I finally had time to set up a website for it. That's what it looks like. The name is Pain-Free Passwords, PFP. So if anybody of you wants to contribute to that project, you're welcome. And I think that's where I'm going to end my presentation. I put up the links for this presentation if you want to have more information under this address. I will also upload the presentation itself there afterwards. So there you can find all the relevant links if you want to know more. Do you have any questions?
If you have any questions, just raise your hand.
First of all, thank you for creating Adblock. My question is about your business model. How does I/O survive?
I'm sorry, how?
What is the business model of I/O?
Oh, the business model. Yeah, I mentioned the acceptable ads program. So some ads are being allowed. On the one hand, that is creating a significant overhead because I/O has to enforce enforce the acceptable ads criteria. But on the other hand, it also allows I/O to charge an amount so the companies that are in the acceptable ads program sometimes, not the smaller ones don't, but the larger ones will pay an amount to I/O so that the product can be sustainable.
Okay, next question. Just raise your arm. Okay, no one. So let's give one final round of applause for Wladimir for his presentation.
Thank you.